Critical analysis of Maddamar book, both defective and effective sides. The author of the book is Abiy Ahmed, the current Ethiopian Prime Minister and the winner of the Nobel Peace Prize 2019. My name is Aman Kedir Kamsare. I studied pedagogical science and sociolinguistics. I earned my master's degree in science of literature at the Arctic University of Tromsø. Currently, I am a human rights activist and a writer. In this brief discussion, I would like to explore and critically analyze the so-called the Maddamar philosophy as claimed by the author. In this lecture, I will attempt to answer the following fundamental questions. 1. What is the origin of the so-called Maddamar philosophy? Second, is Maddamar sophistry or philosophy? 3. Is it science or apologetic reconfigured for defending and legitimizing the monocultural and monolinguistic old Ethiopian state based on one group? 4. Is it indigenous to the Ethiopian ideological and political treasury or borrowed from foreign ideology? Does it have any relevance to the addressing the urgent demands of the ordinary people? Does it alleviate or aggravate the rampant employment, poverty, land grabbing, or old and newly emerging conflicts? Does it have any relevance to addressing the urgent demands of the ordinary people? What is its impact on the multinational federal system and the present constitution? Is the Nobel Peace Prize laureate up to the national and in expectations of national and international community? Using the above basic questions as an instrument of analysis, I will try to deconstruct or debunk both the constructive and the destructive consequences that emanate from the so-called Maddamar theory. The constructive sides can be summarized into 3 categories. The first is critical analysis of the modernization of Emperor Haile Selassie regime. As history testifies, Emperor Haile Selassie tried to modernize Ethiopia by importing foreign ideology of modernization, by importing institutional models from European, and finally by importing 1931 constitution from the the Japanese model. All these, the borrowed institutions, models, didn't work as expected because it doesn't have any correspondence with the concrete reality in the country or the political context in the country. So this book, the author, in this book, the author tried to reprimand the failure and the failure of the modernization policy of the emperor. The second, the book explicates the pitfalls of the importation of Marxism-Leninism to the Ethiopian political situation. By imposing Marxist-Leninist theory and philosophy, the military junta just murdered hundreds and thousands of young generations youth on the streets of the capital city. And thousands and hundreds were extrajudicially executed, incarcerated in prison cells, and a lot of huge material and human resource was destroyed. The last point of critics of the book is the destructive role played by the TPLF government regime by introducing revolutionary democracy, the theory of developmental state, and finally the theory of dominant party in Ethiopia. Saying about the negative consequences of the constructive side of the book, this much, I will try to now critically analyze about the negative sides of this book. First, I would like to shed light on its origin. Theorizing and philosophizing synergy. The word Maddamar is not original to indigenous to the Ethiopian political landscape, as I tried to explain above. It is an Amharic translation for the word synergy. Copying and translating Maslow's hierarchy of needs is another pitfalls of this book. The author uses the models that is theorized by Maslow as hierarchy of needs, which are physiological needs, the needs for security, self-esteem, and finally self-actualization. But short of acknowledging the idea directly taken from the author, he didn't mention where these fundamental tenets of the Maddamar philosophy comes from. And explaining the fundamental principle and the fundamental idea of the Maddamar philosophy, the author claims, or the central tenet of this philosophy is the Ethiopian unity. But which type of unity? We don't have any information about this. He doesn't talk about which type of unity is he talking about. Is it the unity that is imposed by force or top-down homogenization? Or is it voluntary union of free and equal people? We don't know. The second is Maddamar science or apologetic? I incline to say it is apologetics. It is a systematic or cosmological defense and a theoretical justification of the hegemony or supremacy of the Amhara ruling class under the old Ethiopian state. Neither is Maddamar science nor philosophy, but it is simple sophistry. Maddamar can be thus Maddamar can be characterized as a typical sophistry aimed at hanging on power through political manipulation. It has nothing to do with philosophy, because philosophy is basically love of wisdom and the constant search for truth, as explained by Aristotle. Is it indigenous? Is Maddamar indigenous to the Ethiopian values, political culture, or ideology? Does it have anything to do with the internal values, the indigenous values? No. My answer is no. As far as synergy is foreigner to Ethiopia, Maddamar is not indigenous either. Maddamar does not contain any homegrown values, cultures, mindsets, psychological characteristics, let alone being internal. Even it does not exhibit any feature of Gada system and egalitarian mode of life. Maddamar is an Amharic misnomer for the word synergy and old Ethiopian state. In other words, it is romantic narrative, nostalgic romantic narrative for the restoration of the old Naftanya system. Does it have relevance to particularly to the Ethiopian political, economic, social problems? My answer is no. Maddamar does not have any correlation with the Ethiopian political context, or it is not related in any way to in solving the current burning issues and demands of the people. It does not propose any concrete action plan in addressing unemployment, engulfing especially the youth. It does not show the way how chronic poverty is alleviated. When we talk about Ethiopia, when the world and international community talk about Ethiopia, Ethiopia and poverty are synonyms. That this Maddamar addresses this chronic problem? No. On the other hand, it creates new conflicts and aggravates the old one. The Prime Minister is obsessed, engaged in building and rejuvenating statues of the monarchs. For example, he expended millions of dollars that was paid by the poor, the ordinary people, in erecting, decorating these old statues of the emperors, including Meles Zenawi, the dictator. and as well Mengistu Haile Mariam, the leader of the military junta. It is better to take analogy. For example, if a German leader, let us say chancellor, started to erect the statue or start to rejuvenate the statue of Hitler, how do his victims, the Jews, feel? And all freedom-loving humanity. The same analogy can be drawn between the Menelik, the one he is decorating, and the one he is adorating by rejuvenating, decorating his statue. What should the people who have been mutilated at Anole and who were murdered and mass graved at Jalango? The book ignores popular demands and distracts attention from the real issues on the ground. Building statues, decorating the monarchs, it is not a burning issue. And dissolving the current ruling party and forming a new prosperity party is not an urgent task today in Ethiopia. It keeps a silence on burning issues such as land grabbing and competition and compensation and competition for political space and competition for resources. These things are urgent issues today in Ethiopia. The competition for political power and the question of democratic transition. These are the issues that should get priority and primary importance. But the book does not mention anything about this problem. It does not mention a word about national dialogue and reconciliation. Without national dialogue, without compromise, democratic transition is unthinkable, as the experiences of many countries tells. It keeps silent in addressing historical injustice, rather than, on the contrary, the writer denies historical injustice. Impact on the multinational federalism and the present constitution. The writer confuses the difference between nationalism and racism. By this I mean, he argues that as if nationalism and racism are synonyms, but the difference between nationalism and racism is the difference between the sky and the earth. When we talk about nationalism, we are talking about historical phenomena, historical category that develops through history. When we talk about nationalism, we're talking about languages, we're talking about identities, we're talking about history, we're talking about psychological makeup that manifested itself in national culture. and we talk about geography. But when we talk about racism, racism is an eternal category, the category that existed as nature existed. When we talk about physiological, we talk about biological aspects of human nature. We talk about blood relationship. We talk about the color, the three colors of human beings, which are Caucasoid, Negroid, and Mongoloid. When we talk about racism, I think which is not presently non-existent in the Ethiopian political system, because all Ethiopian peoples are the same in color. All Ethiopians are actually blacks. There is no racial difference. There is no difference in physiology. There is no difference in biology. There is no difference in blood relation. Even we cannot identify which blood is which, the categories of the blood. What does looks it like being an Oromo? What type of blood has an Oromo? What type of blood Amara and others? We cannot tell. So he tries to confuse the two categories, which are diametrically opposite to each other. Nationalism, which is legitimate, nationalism, which is historical tendency and historically legitimized even mode of living, mode of organizing states, mode of organizing democracy. For example, even today, national questions are burning and urgent. We can take Catalan in Spain. We can take the Corsican in France. We can take even the Ireland in Great Britain. So historical tendency of even the systems, the ideologies is sovereignty is reviving in modern days. So the writer does not understand even historical and global tendencies. He bases his argument or bases the formation of the Ethiopian state on a fallacious argument. That is the basis of for the formation of the Ethiopian central state. He claims to be religion, migration, and war of aggression, which is totally unacceptable and irrelevant. Through wars of aggression, states are not formed, either destroyed, dismantled. The history of the Ethiopian state is the history of blood and the history of wars, the history of destruction. When he claims migration to be the epicenter of the formation of Ethiopian state, migration actually is immigration, migration is universal phenomenon. People migrate, immigrate from one country to the other, but as a result of migration and immigration, states are not built, but social intercourse strings. Sympathizes the ruling class rather than align with the ordinary people. That is veneration and adoration of the monarchs is one of the elements one can read in the book. For example, when he's talking about Emperor Theodorus, he was sympathizing, and Emperor was failed because the people didn't listen to him. Theodorus is actually a murderer. History knows that Theodorus is actually murdered 7,000 prisoners in a day. When he is, the other thing is romantic nostalgia and narrative and excessive obsession of the vainglory of the kings and the golden days of the Amhara ruling class. This is shown, portrayed by decorating all the statues and constructing the new ones, especially by importing from Japan, by paying millions of dollars, which was paid by the Ethiopian taxpayers. He failed to live up to the national and the expectations of national and international community. Prioritizing what is not urgent and delaying the urgent. The project of dissolving the old party and forming the new one is an example. Continuation of the state of emergency, imposition of the so-called command post on the western, southern parts of Oromia, especially Walaga, Guji, and Boran. Still innocent people bleeding, dying day after day. Crack down on why the prime minister is engaged in cracking down and widespread arbitrary arrest of opposition members. Presently, they are hunting down and sending to prison, especially the members of opposition parties, the members of OLF, the members of National Independent Party, and the member of Oromo National Congress. Human rights abuses and extrajudicial killing is rampant today more than any other time. Even recently, a famous women musician, was attacked in the capital city, in Addis Ababa, just while trying to attend a musical concert. Reversing the peacemaking initiative is one of the things that the Prime Minister failed. The Nobel Peace Prize winner Prime Minister failed his expectation. He is making war, internal war, rather than making peace. Even the initiative and the process that started with the neighboring countries, especially Eritrea, is stopped. Today, the relationship between the two countries is only personal relationship with Isaias Afwerki of Eritrea and Abiy Ahmed of Ethiopia. This relationship, the peace initiative, is not institutionalized. So, and the points of conflict are not resolved. The territorial dispute and especially the demarcation, it is still remains as it was under the TPLF regime. Even we cannot tell what will happen in this regard, what will happen in the future in the relationship between these two countries. Are we going to fight again, and are we going to send our children to the war again? Is this relationship the relationship between the leaders, or is it the relationship between the two nations? It is uncertain. It is difficult to tell. The Nobel Peace Laureate is not living up to the expectation of national and international communities. I think the Nobel Peace Prize is not a passport to reverse, to arrest, to kill, to wage war on civilian people. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.